Policymakers have their own choices. They have their own constraints, their own understanding, their own kind of... The policymakers are accountable. Scholars are not. Pleased to be part of this conference, and I appreciate the organizers, particularly President Ivanov and also Mark, who invited me again to this session. I've been attending culture diplomacy meetings since 2007. Every year, each time I attend, I think I see it more elaborate, richer than before. So I thank you for this. Well, I wanted to actually address the young leaders that speaking about peace is easier than bringing peace together. We are living in a very complicated, uncertain world, and so many actors who have competing demands. I teach one course on strategic influencing. When you make a decision, when you want to implement it, it is not easy. You have to deal with so many actors who either impede your actions or can actually ease your action or help your actions. But you have to deal. It's a kind of, it's all what negotiations in dealing. However, the world is not that simple. There is an eternal debate over the nature and dynamics of widening gap between the world of ideas and the world of action. The gap between thinkers and doers, between the scholars and policymakers. I've been gained experience in both world of academic and policy during my career. And even in my career, intimate career as a journalist, I have looked at the issues which brings the policymakers and scholars at the loggerhead. So how we can narrow that gap with the new technology, the scholars make rigorous research and quantification of things, while the policymakers live in a world of constant and instant changes. They do not have time for rigorous and exhausting investigations. They think, or they are based on their experience and intuitive skills. And that's something that affects during all the decisions that are implemented today in the foreign policy. I can go on and on, but I will specifically talk about the problems we faced in bringing peace to Afghanistan. Why, after 20 years, with so much blood and treasure, we removed the Taliban back in power in Afghanistan? Why it happened with all the sacrifices that was we saw in the different areas. I was involved in peace process in 3 different levels. At the beginning and before 9/11, I published an article in Parameters, which is the senior journal of the United States Army, published from Carlisle Barracks, Army War College. In that article, which was published in February 2001, a few months before 9/11, there I argued that if you want to bring peace and stability to Afghanistan, you have to reverse all what you've done in the past. In the past, you forced peace through use of force. You use of force to bring peace. I think you have to find a way to bring kind of a political settlement by international cooperation, then enforce the peace, sustain it by force. But, well, 9/11 took place, and then after that, while I was in the government, the next stage, we missed two opportunities to peace at a very cheap price, low price. First was the Bonn Conference. In a Bonn Conference, only one side of the civil war were allowed to participate. A civil war ends in two ways. Either one side defeat the other one, and then bring peace, like you saw it in Sri Lanka. Or the two sides agree to a kind of a settlement, political settlement. Neither one took place in Afghanistan. The Taliban were removed of power, but not defeated. So what they did, they just left the country to the neighboring country and regrouped themselves and come back. And they were not, at the same time, they were not allowed to participate in the peace negotiations in the Bonn Conference. Although Bonn Conference was not a peace conference, it was an emergency conference to actually fill the gap, the vacuum that was created by the fall of the Taliban. Now, the second time that, at that time, in the Bonn, I would remind you that in that time, 85% of Taliban was willing to join the peace process. But at that time, because of the mentality, by many actors, international actors and Afghan actors were labeled as terrorists. So you do not negotiate with terrorists. 20 years later, you're negotiating with Taliban now, under very different conditions. And that was first the opportunity we missed. The second opportunity was 2003. When Taliban were convinced that they cannot win militarily, they actually came to us. At that time, I was Minister of Interior. Minister of Interior at that time actually also had all the local governments, provincial government after that ministry. It was a strong ministry. So they sent they sent feelers that we are ready to negotiate with you. They were weak at that time. The government was strong. People supporting the government. Government was unified. That was the ideal time for negotiations. And we discussed it in the Security Council, and we agreed that, okay, let's talk to Taliban. So they came. They came, sent one person to me, to Minister of Defense, to President Karzai, and some others. They were high-ranking officials. The one who came to me to discuss this with me was the Chief Justice of the Taliban. And I asked him, what are their demands? What do you want? He said, immunity from prosecution, one. The second one is to allow us come here to operate as a political party. We'll disarm political party. I said, this is very easy. I can lobby for you for this. They said, no, it's not that easy. You are not alone. Your government is not united. You are different. Minister of Defense is different. Then you have the 40 countries here. There are intelligence agencies here. There are coalition forces here. There's ISAF here. So if all of you can collectively give us this guarantee, we will come back as a peaceful people and political people. We discussed it 2 months, and some of our Afghan friends who were fighting them in the past were not willing to accept that. They thought that they are in a better position and the Taliban are a spent force. And then international actors at that time were busy with the invasion of Iraq. And all attention shifted from Afghanistan to Iraq. So we did not come to a conclusion. The Taliban went, rearmed, regrouped, and after 2005, started insurgency inside Afghanistan. Now, finally, in 2020, President Trump agreed to negotiate with Taliban, but in a very different conditions. That was the time that Taliban thought that the U.S. is leaving. This negotiation of Doha is not the negotiation, it's an exit strategy for the United States. So why they should actually give much, to the Afghan government? Okay. The idea base of Doha was this, that the United States several times tried to negotiate with Taliban. Taliban said, as long as foreign troops are in Afghanistan, we are not going to negotiate. So, okay, in order to negotiate with Taliban, the United States agreed to withdraw its forces in 14 months. Okay, once one side says we are withdrawing troops, the other side thinks it's a better position, it's a strong position. Why they should actually give more concessions? Because in 14 years, the Afghan government is dependent on the assistance from the United States, from the army, from the sustenance of institutions. And even 70% of the budget of that government is provided by the United States. So why the Taliban would give concessions? They said, yes, we will 14 years, fine, you leave, and in that period we will not attack you. And then the other condition was, in this period, you negotiate with the Afghan government, which was a strategic partner of the United States, and then you reach a kind of a political settlement for a coalition government. Well, that was something that some people believe. At that time, I wrote that it was something that Taliban will always run the clock. They said when they leave, the Afghan government is dependent on them, so we will easily, take over. So if we can take all of it, why it will negotiate for half of it? That's exactly what happened during the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan, the Mujahideen. The United Nations is trying to bring some kind of a peaceful solution between the Afghan government at that time, the Moscow-backed government, and the Mujahideen. But the Mujahideen was thinking, why when the Soviet Union leave and they cannot survive? So why it won't, take half of it, why cannot all of it? So therefore, that was the problem. The Taliban thought that leaving the U.S., and then it is not going to be, the government of Afghanistan will not sustain. In third phase, and the last one that I'm saying, in 2020, when the Doha negotiations started between the United States, the President Mr. Khalilzad, Ambassador Khalilzad, and the Taliban in Doha, I became part of a congressional bipartisan commission. They call it Afghanistan Study Group. I was a senior advisor to the group. It was composed of bipartisan, both parties, and also Mr. Dunford, General Dunford, the former Joint Chief, was chair of the committee, and many other, all U.S. ambassadors to Afghanistan, all special envoys of U.S. to Afghanistan were part of this commission. And we were asked two questions. One was, if the Doha negotiation succeeds, what should be the policy of the United States toward Afghanistan? If the Doha negotiation fails, what be the recommended policy for the United States? The commission worked for 1 long year. And we caught everybody, in the United States, in Afghanistan, in Europe, all allies. And finally, the report was released in February 2021. And it is available, Afghanistan Study Group report, on the USIP, the website. Two questions were in that main. It is long, a very long report. But we recommended two things. We said that if the United States forces cannot stay in Afghanistan forever, but in order to pave the way for this, if the United States Army leaves before a settlement between Taliban and Afghan government is achieved, there will be chaos in Afghanistan. Taliban will take over and there will be chaos. If the U.S. wait until when the negotiation between Afghan government and Taliban leads to a kind of political settlement and joint government, then the United States Army can leave in peace. And then that can guarantee some kind of stability in Afghanistan. However, this recommendation was given to the Congress, that it was mandated that Congress, that the Commission, and also to the government. But the government, its own decision, and left Afghanistan. Now, the people who were involved in this, like General McKenzie, like others in the Joint Chiefs of Staff, say that they recommended that to stay in Afghanistan because it was not the problem. 2,500 people will not, soldiers will not cost a lot. However, what was important? About 17,000 contractors were serving and sustaining Afghanistan Air Force and other weaponry. When they left, 90% of the Afghanistan Air Force, actually all of it is stopped. Everything depended on the foreign troops. Well, why it was so dependent? It's another question that we can discuss, for hours. So therefore, that was the other one. So when I said before that it is speaking of peace and arguing for peace is good, as beneficial as one thing, then you are working in an environment that you have so many actors, and then at the same time, policymakers have their own choices. They have their own constraints, their own understanding, their own kind of. The policymakers are accountable. Scholars are not. Many scholars in 1992 in the United States, some of them are very prominent scholars, said that if the East Germany joins, Germany is unified, then there will be war in Europe. And they are not accountable. That didn't happen, but they are not accountable. The same thing went. So therefore, what I'm saying here is it's good to peace. I think it's always good to argue and discuss this, but should realize that leading to peace has to take into consideration all other issues. I think in first panel, we heard so many things about this. And also, we also heard that it is the wisdom that you should have, how you use your knowledge. You must be right on an argument, but how you can convince others that your argument is good, how you bring it into attention. That is the challenge. I think this challenge will be with you during your lifetime. Thank you very much. I will stop here.